Well, hello, everyone. It is a very special day today.
Yes, it is.
Love and Life Elevated here in the Rouse House studio. I'm Dr. Deborah.
And I'm Dr. James.
And today we have a very special guest. And I could tell you everything about her, but I'm going to read to you what I prepared. And today we're talking with someone who understands the human mind from both the inside out and the outside in. And this is our daughter, Dakota Sunshine Skye Freddie Rouse. She's a dual master student at Adler University in Chicago, double majoring in sports performance psychology and clinical psychology. She's a lifelong athlete and a rising force in transforming how we talk about mental performance, trauma, and healing. So welcome, sweet, beautiful, kind Dakota.
Hi, family. That was an amazing intro. I feel like we can end the podcast there.
Okay. You know what? I'm fine with that because you knew I didn't really want to be on camera today. Since everyone, I did microneedling. I've got funny face, but hey, that's all right.
Can I just go ahead and speak to the elephant in the room? Who named you all those names? Was that us during a very hippie phase of our life?
Yeah. No, and I think the juxtaposition of Ellie and my younger sister having just Grace is really formative in just how our personalities have played out over the years.
Yeah, I hope we get to unpack that today.
But you know what's so great is that I have the easiest icebreaker in the world. When everyone else spears two truths and a lie, I take that on with full force. I'm like, oh, not only by winning, I'm excited.
That was very intentional, the naming process for you, honey.
And thank you for that.
That, along with your father heading out minutes after you were born to go straight to the astrologer to find out what we had in store.
Yeah.
And we never, even though that reading was so spot on, never knew that almost 3 decades later, we would have the most amazing human that we get to call our daughter.
So true.
I know it's amazing that I had to go into counseling. I should have just relied on what the astrologer told me about me. What would be wrong? They're like, oh, it's not trauma. You're just a Scorpio rising.
Well, honey, we are just so grateful that you took the time to join us in your busy, busy life in Chicago. And we've got some really fun questions because I feel like you'd be a guest we'd want to have anyway. And the fact that you're our daughter even makes it so much more special. But go ahead and please, honey, walk us through some of the things that we are going to speak to today because they're tremendous.
Well, the first question that I prepared was for you to tell us about your current work and what fuels your passion at the intersection of athletics and psychology.
Sure. Well, I don't think it's a new conversation people are having in the sports community that mental health matters, right? But I think what's happened and what happens often with issues is that that's a period on that statement, not a, consecutive paragraph that we need to really talk about and dissect. I'm ending out my second year of my grad school experience. And in that I have balanced both my sport classes as well as counseling classes. And what's so incredible is that they overlap so often with the issues that both athletes and individuals face. To be a high performance athlete is also to be a high performance individual. And so
that's so well said.
Yeah, we'll just pinpoint that. But it's not unusual. What you'll face on the field is what you'll face off the field. It's been such a treat to have my externship. I've been working with Division III athletes, and in Division III, you don't typically get scholarships, and my kiddos are no exception to that. And so it's been really fun to dissect both the love of the game and the love of life, and seeing where they're struggling on the field and how that parlays with off the field.
That is amazing. By the way, just noticed in your background, your nice little Patriots wall hanging over there.
Listen,
represent.
Yes. I hate to say that I have ESPN muted in the background.
Can I go ahead and ask the obvious? Is that Patriot? I mean, how did that find its way into your life?
Oh, well, my fabulous fiance, we were actually at the Old Town Art Fair here in Chicago about, 3 years ago. And I, of course, lose him in the crowds of it all because we'd ran into 50 people we knew within the span of 2 minutes. And in finding him again 5 minutes later, he's just carrying this plank of wood that has the Patriots embolded on it, essentially. And he goes, "Found this for you." without any awareness that, mind you, we have to take this on a train now. We're about 40 minutes from home. Like, it was such a sweet, but what's so great is that because we had such an excellent draft showing last night that I finally got to take it out of the restroom. It had previously been residing.
Well, not to mention what a champion is, because he's such a major Eagles fan. So
Yeah.
yes,
Right.
it's one of
And
the many reasons why we love him.
Yes, exactly. Being an Eagles fan is actually really it's celebrated right now. So I'm letting him, hear that and feel that.
Dakota, you said something a moment ago, and I'd love to kind of get your insights onto how, through what you're learning at the university and the people who've been a part of more sports performance psychology over this last decade or so, and how the iteration and the more openness and the dialogue, how it's expanding, where this is something just a few years ago wasn't being talked about to the degree it is now. And I feel like one of the things that you're learning and one of the things that you're helping to bring to life is how this is an area, not only is it necessary, but how much it's an augmenting force for performance psychology and a general level, because every human being is an athlete on some level, and how we are all looking to find our way into performing in the best way that we can, bringing our gifts and talents to the world in a time when it's really difficult to really see ourselves being vulnerable and exposed. How does that, something that you're seeing in your experience and your training, that you're seeing how this openness is leading to not just the sports area, to the general public?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, it's been a conversation and it's been one in passing, right? Versus one that's intentional and intended to do work. It's, I think, more often, especially in male dominated sports specifically, is what I'll speak to here, is that there would be tragedies, whether that's an athlete taking their own life or there's abuse of some nature, and we see it as this anomaly when it's a pattern. And we are quicker or more quick to write that off, because looking at the issues and the patterns that led up to that is very difficult. And it's intense and it's heavy. And so it's easier to turn a blind eye when the majority of athletes, quote unquote, are doing just fine. I think what I've seen, and just in being an athlete myself, being getting married to a college athlete, having two parents who are athletes, having a sister who is athletic, is that there's a conversation around the athletic identity that's being a lot more, that's a lot deeper than it was previously. That the athletic identity is not just how you show up on the field, and if you have really good RBIs, it's multicultural, it's your gender, it's your sexual identity, it's all these things, all these factors that make you up as a human and are celebrated, versus just what you can show and pitch and receive, and everything kind of under that lens. I specifically, like, my education has been largely under the Veely model, and how these are, we have a new friend, the skills and foundational skills that are built into an athlete. And I think that's what's so great, is because it breaks down how you can, quote unquote, treat an athlete so that it can feel a little bit more unique and catered, versus having to look at the entire athletic experience and be like, oh my gosh, how do we diagnose the entire thing? When that's not what we're asking. We're asking for athletes to have the opportunity to look at, hey, this is the specific area I'm struggling, and I'd really like to work on that, because I don't want to say everything's wrong, but I'm allowed to say something is wrong.
Wow, what a great distinction that is.
Wow. You made me think of two things, but I want to take a tiny step backwards, and I want to talk about your path to where you are now. Because as an undergrad, and you were studying psychology as an undergrad, but you sort of were thinking you were going to go more towards, say, human rights law. You're down the law path. Paralegal, you worked in paralegal. Was there a pivotal time in life or in the classroom where you knew, like, you had a light bulb that this was your calling, when you kind of pivoted?
Absolutely. I think, well, listen, you both know sports have been something I have loved from a very long time. I love sports in the same way I love to live. I love the minutia of sport. I love dissecting averages. I love the story. I love following athletes. I mean, gosh, if I could just sit on the couch and watch 30 for 30s all day and cry, That's the dream, right? Like I'm like stay at home mom. I'm like that sounds perfect for me. Um, so I would say it's hard to pinpoint exactly where my love is for, but I think about a lot about my journey with paralegal and wanting to work in law. I wanted to work in law when I started an internship with the victim service unit back in Bozeman, Montana, wherein I helped aided rather individuals who were dealing with domestic violence and assault of any nature and seeking orders of protection and specifically seeking less expensive legal aid. Whether that was free, whether that was assisted, anywhere on that spectrum. And what was so beautiful about that experience was that I saw how critical that work is and how crucial and needed, as well as something I could be doing. It was work that I saw the direct, oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Results of, which is what's so sometimes, it's always put in the work and eventually you'll see it. This was like I could stand in a courtroom and I could see justice be served, literally and figuratively. So, a couple of years later, and I get my paralegal degree and I go through all the runs and motions of that, I start to see, as with any, career, negativity and negative aspects of it that didn't align with me. A great example of this is a partner I worked under said, "Oh, good, we have our diversity hire," because I was a woman. Which is not right, mind you. Also insane to say.
Right.
Among a lot of other things. And quickly left that firm. And then I actually went to a firm that was really lovely and very a great team. And I saw my life for the next 20 years. And it was a really nice life, and I was incredibly bored. And so
Right.
I had to go back to the drawing board, which, for anyone listening, you can always go back to the drawing board. Just in case you can always go back to the drawing board. I thought it was over at 25 and it was just fine. And I really had to get clear about my passions because I think sometimes we forget about that in undergrad. Sometimes we forget about it in postgrad is what did I really feel like I was put on this earth to do? And I knew something that had remained true to me and been by my side was loving sports. I mean, I was that person you'd hate to see coming at a bar because I'd be like, have you heard about this today? Like, it's something I really love to do. And it was really genuine. And I think everyone is really, and, I really truly believe everyone has something they genuinely love. And that I just had to be really clear. I was like, this is mine. And everything Mom, I've talked to you at great lengths that as well, is that as soon as I committed to going back to school, doing it through the university, which I chose, which is a social justice institute, and being able to really work in sport, talk about sport, and involve myself in sport, everything started to align. Everything started to work out. Everything started to work up. I felt better. I slept better. It's a testament to when you find what you love and you finally listen to yourself, things really do happen.
That is so, it's hard for me to separate myself as your father to hear what you just said about this idea of finding this and sleeping better and feeling better about yourself. And just to, I want to share something because I think this is really, it speaks so much to, I think, the relationship that you and I share. You've watched me since you were a little bean cry in front of sports. Like I mean, let's face it, 30 for 30, even an ESPN commercial that speaks to the vulnerability of athletics.
What about the ESPY award?
ESPY award.
Oh,
I mean, I'm a mess.
I have to prepare myself for that one. That's like take a walk every 5 minutes.
I mean, and if I kind of help kind of pave a path in a way that was ultra vulnerable, I'm not sure if I'm sorry or not sorry, sweetheart, but I gotta tell you, there's so much about what you just said that speaks to what a dad would always hope their child could feel about life. And I'm just so there's my thing.
Yeah, same. I was thinking how it kind of brings tears to my eyes, and it certainly did 2.5 years ago when you discovered the program that you're currently in, and like just those tinglies that I got all over when you were like, I found my program, and then when you described it to me, how it 100% aligned with everything that you were searching for when you were like, I can't find my path, my way, but you knew it was out there. And then when it landed, it landed. big time. And it's just been amazing. You blow our minds constantly with your wisdom and your sharings of the work that you're doing. It's so needed and it's so impressive.
Yeah, I think that is something, the way you spoke to your present life experience, sweetheart. How do you, when you're walking out in the world and someone would say to you, I'm not necessarily an athlete in the way that you're working with athletes at more of a, a college level, high school level, professional level, but I'm someone who wants to look at the idea of sport and athleticism and bring it into my life as a professional in whatever capacity we are doing out in the world. What are some of the themes that you see overlapping for people that you could help someone to say, here's something you can see in a way that, whether it's training, whether it's mental discipline, whether it's, working with anxiety or depression. Do you have some pearls there, honey, that you can help us to kind of bring to real life for our community?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I think the worlds are a lot closer than we think. Just because you weren't a professional athlete or you weren't even maybe a high school athlete, I think we're really quick to minimize our experience in physical activity when we're not perfect at it. And I think that goes across levels. Like I can say I love writing, but I've never been published, so I'm not a writer. And you just chopped yourself out of the game. And for what? No one asked you to. No one asked you to bench. You created a bench, right?
Right.
I think the biggest pearl I see in the overlap of it all is always going to come back to identity. And identity is so fluid, and so ever changing and so reflective of your environment, of the people around you, of the time and space you're in. Gosh, my 25-year-old identity versus 28 are two very different people, and I honor her. Do I love her? Yes, of course. But you know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
so I think what I often find myself doing with the athletes I work with, and I think vice versa, I'll be doing it with just clients I take on, just specifically in the therapeutic space, will be identity work, because more often than not, that is the steer that you lose. You always have your ship, but often, like, if you lose control of it, you're going to feel a little crazy. I love to do something that's called personal mapping. And what I'll have someone do is I'll have them visualize the last time they felt really fabulous, and what that kind of looked like. And I'll have them really go through who was there and the environment and where they felt it. Was it in their toes? Was it in their chest? Was it in their head? Was it there? They can't feel their hands. So really, it's a deep, deep visualization. And then I'll have them write down the feelings, the emotions, what they were doing, and what are 5 things that make them feel like that. Then vice versa, we'll put out 5 things that make them feel like crap, but that they continuously keep doing. And I think more often that's gonna be doom scrolling. It's talking crap about other people. It's, sitting when they could be walking, which I don't want to say that you can't, rest is rest, but you know what I'm saying? And what we'll do is we'll basically create the algebra of life, which is saying, I'm going to do 5 minutes of creative writing instead of 5 minutes of doom scrolling. Minute by minute, small little pieces of goal setting. And that therein, they can kind of rebuild this personal identity that maybe they felt they lost.
That is so, so powerful. It speaks to so many practices I think we see a lot in Eastern wisdom around, like something called Kaizen, which is a Japanese word for incremental improvement, step by step, small shifts that we can make, and how over time we literally, if you will, change the direction of the ship. Like 20, 25, 30 years of going down a certain way through the ocean, you're like, you know what? This isn't my current anymore. This is not my water anymore. And then using incremental.
You used to call it like the trim tab.
The trim tab, which is a little rudder on the big rudder that helps us to really steer in an incremental way, because I think sometimes it feels like it's overwhelming to think about, how do I turn this life around, or how do I move in the direction that's more on purpose, my dharma. And then you find yourself going, you know what? It's these incremental practices every single day that can be just a few minutes, but the relationship to self-efficacy and confidence building is absolutely so powerful. I love that mapping practice, honey. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and look, bad habits grow the same way good habits do, and they take the same amount of time off your life. It's just a matter of how they're building you. So
beautiful.
Wow. I was thinking about both of our paths in a certain sport, but before I get there, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. You talked about it, you brought it up a little bit earlier, the idea around trauma and how, when you were working with victims of domestic violence, for example, in Bozeman, and you saw like how that impacted them, whether that trauma was deeply physical, emotional. So I want to ask you, how does trauma, whether physical or emotional, show up in the mindset and performance in athletes or executives or stay-at-home moms or your typical teen, let's say?
Totally. I think trauma, we often like to try and talk ourselves out of the trauma we experienced, is the thing I see more often than not. It's either, and then vice versa, then we find ourselves oversharing about it later because we couldn't share it at its nauseum previously. Right. So when something happens to you that's outside of your control, because trauma becomes very traumatic when it's outside of your control, you talk yourself out of the experience. So that means you experienced it less than, right? But your body still took that on. Your brain still stored that, even if they've pushed it back to some suppressive space. So then you'll find it coming out in other areas where it's not helpful. Not that trauma is ever necessarily helpful, but you'll see it in, specifically with athletes, you see it in how they might be more quiet on the field, or they might be a little angrier on the field. You'll find that they have like a little bit of inappropriate reactions to things that happen. Say, they got checked in lacrosse, but it was like a completely valid, checking lacrosse happens, but they, explode and, takes it to a very different space. And you'll realize something else is going on there. And more often than not, it's very layered, healed trauma. And I always say that, therapy is so interesting because a lot of what you see when you get into it is that someone put a band-aid on something that should have been a surgery. And that, that is an incision that is reopening, and it's having more stuff go into it. So then it's infected, and then it takes over the whole system.
Wow.
And what is hard is, and it's why therapy or just, therapy and sport is so important. And just for the general population as well, is because heal it first, you don't see it later, and
Wow.
That's a powerful distinction, sweetheart. I love that idea about healing something with Band-Aids versus actually going in and really doing the deep work. And I think that's something I've learned through watching you in this experience, sweetheart, not just with what you're doing in your present master's work, but even so, I think to the iterations of high school, college, grad school, the ways in which you have given yourself permission to look deep within areas of your own life. And I think there's a lot of permission, and I imagine you see this with people that you're working with. The people who are some of the best therapists, the best healers, are the ones who have done a lot of their own work and they know what it's like to be in hell. They know what it's like to go through their dark night. Do you find, sweetheart, some of your storylines, whether as an athlete, some of the traumas you've had as an athlete physically, some of the things you've been through as a young woman in different iterations of that experience, and just the way in which you are able to stand in your truth and bring that truth as a bridge builder to people who are working on finding their truth?
Yeah, often not. I mean, most of my professors will always say that you should never ask a client to do something you have not already done yourself. That doesn't mean experience the same thing they have, but you can't ask someone to work on themselves, try to heal themselves, try to be transparent and honest with themselves if you yourself are still stuck from doing that. I mean, we joke about it now, but I didn't make my high school career very easy for you. It was a lot of pushback, a lot of sass at a minimal. And as you know, and maybe your audience does as well, is I got really sick when I was 14. I had something happen, and it's actually still, I think, what's so difficult, especially within our family talking about it, is it's a really large mystery. We have been able to kind of diagnose around it, and we think we might know what it was, but it really was just, I got really sick. I spent a lot of time in the hospital, and I had to have surgery on my lungs, and that's all very traumatic. And I think what was hard about it was that, and this is obviously, no, I don't want to shame the doctors that we worked with because they were fabulous, but like we kind of got like boxed up and said, well, her blood pressure is good and she no longer has the filled lung, and we'll call it, right? And then we kind of went home and we said, well, that was crazy. And really what should have happened is I should have been put straight into therapy after that, But I don't think I think I was so happy. We were so happy to get me out of the hospital. We're so happy I was feeling better that it was like, okay, we're going to go back to sports and all this stuff. And, physically, I felt it. I think we all remember the track meet where I almost passed out because I did a way too quick return to play. I was way too scared to go back to softball, sport I had originally loved, and it was started with little cracks. And then I started just to be my worst version of myself, and I'm sure there are hormones involved with that. I'm sure there is something to the effect of moving from different high schools and experiencing bullying and having all that. But I think the real crux of it is that I experienced a near-death scenario and I didn't have language around that. And I was also scared to have language around it because the whole thing was scary. I think that's what happens a lot with trauma is that it's not because you don't want to talk about it, it's that it is very scary. And fear is one of those human emotions that is legitimately so difficult to work around because it's so real.
You bring up a few really important things when addressing that question. As the patient and the person who really could have used therapy, and having two parents as doctors and someone with a master's in integrative mental health in counseling, and are suggesting to you therapy, which you were very resistant about at the time. And then as parents in retrospect, looking back, like, should we have just forced her into it, knowing like we have the tools, but also I think it's important to have some separation. So I want to address that, but also being mindful that when you're seeing someone, that door has been open. Like you have that opportunity to grab 15-year-old Dakota, 14-year-old Dakota who experienced near death, who experienced like a pretty horrific, scary situation. And I think the hard part is finding the right person that can really open up that person's mind and experience, because you were very close down after that and you like walled it off.
Yeah.
So what would you say, like, if you could re-counsel Dad and I, for example, about how we could have better parented, and you may or may not have the answer for that. It may have just been your journey and our journey with you. But do you have any like insight looking back?
I have the insight in the sense that I can look at it from a really, really far up bird's eye view and go, I think this might have been better. However, I love who I am today and I love our relationship today. So there's two coins, right?
Right.
And I don't say for my scenario specifically, but I say this as like kind of a larger, larger suggestion is that it's so important to give the patient, quote unquote, autonomy. And giving them a sense of, hey, this is kind of where we want the finish line to be. This is ideally the conclusion we get to. What path do you want to lay? Is it with brick? Is it with stone? Is it cement?
Let it slide.
Yeah, like putting skis on. What are we doing? I think a lot of it, and we see that a lot with athletes specifically, because especially when you look at college athletes, professional athletes, they have largely been told how to move their bodies, how to feed their bodies, how to nurture their bodies, how to act in public, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. Giving autonomy back is so crucial. And especially, I think, specifically in my scenario where my body essentially turned against me out of nowhere. I was an extremely healthy kid on all, fronts. And just I think getting some decision-making back, some choice back probably would have, who's to say what I would have done? I was pretty much anti anything and everything that came my way, short of getting like a Webkins. That was that was the only thing. But I think if we can go back, and I just think about moving forward is really just giving autonomy back to our clients, to our patients, to our athletes, because that is more often what is lost first and not all the time regained.
That is such a powerful idea. The data on agency.
I was going to ask if you thought agency and autonomy were like the same thing.
What do you think, sweetheart?
Yeah, I think they're different meanings in different contexts, but I think they hold hands.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so sorry to interrupt.
Autonomy, you gain agency. And when you have
Oh,
agency, you're
okay.
more likely to
That
have
helps
autonomy.
me.
Yeah, I mean that's enough said on that. But I think that when you look at what happens, whether it's in a sporting environment, in a corporate environment, we speak in corporate environments over and over about agency and its relationship to productivity and mental health, and feeling like you can come and bring your best self to the culture that you're in and the company culture. And I think what's happening a lot, and particularly with athletes, what I see as someone who's been a lifelong fan, I see more and more how athletes who are willing, who have been given that opportunity to choose autonomy and boldly step into that and choose that, then they start speaking to the truths of what's happening as human beings. What an incredible way shower they become, and permission givers they give for other athletes who are going, oh my gosh, I needed to see someone who I really identify with step into that arena and hold their truth like that. And I think that's something that leadership, you look at positional leadership versus moral leadership, the captain of the team can do a lot of great things, or the CEO of the company. But what we know more and more, it's their moral fabric that opens up doors and really makes the team or the company feel a sense of purpose and power. And I feel like, honey, you must be seeing this more and more as when you're working with people, helping them to see the moral side. And I don't mean moral like in, that morality, that righteous way, but more a morality around truth of self and vulnerability and ownership, those types of experiences.
Absolutely. Athletes are faced with something that athletes of past have not seen. I mean, we're looking at NIL deals, we're looking at social media, we're looking at access to a world they may have not had access to in the past. And that's why I think we're seeing a rise of, sports psychology fields, mental skills practitioners, everything under that umbrella, is because that team that needs to be around them is not just the team that they belong to, it's a team that is supporting them in order to survive professional sports. Because at the end of the day, it is a gauntlet in itself, and it's a very, very daunting career. It's a very, fruitful career if played correctly, pardon the pun, but it's one that comes with a lot of pitfalls because we have so often or not just rubbed dirt in it versus really healing it.
Yeah, God, which a great distinction, sweetheart. That's so true.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to shift gears. If we can play this little game where I give you sort of a real case scenario, because I think I have shared this story with you before, but also this is very relative because you currently are working with the tennis team and you've worked with the softball team at the university. And what's really awesome, I will brag on you for a minute, is that you did have a really fun experience after you started working with the softball gals, where they came back from like a 5-point deficit, 5-run deficit, to come back and win. So that was awesome. Kudos. And I'm going to give you the credit. So there you go. Okay. So working with tennis, and you yourself, varsity tennis athlete, I want to give you a scenario which happened years ago when I was playing a doubles match, right? And my doubles partner and I were up in the set 5-2. I'm getting ready for service for the set, and she says to me, I hope we don't lose. Okay. We're ahead at 5-2 in the set, and she says, I hope we don't lose, like as in lose the set. What the heck is going on in her head? And we see that. I see that when I'm watching tennis, right? Someone's got this huge lead, they're up 5-1, and then something happens and they drop the set. So, like, what is going on in their mental health coach's mind in that moment? And how do you reframe that mindset?
Oh, I mean, gosh, tennis is so unique in that in my opinion, it's one of the most mental games because
it's very mental.
You're a part of a team, kind of. But when you get to the court, it's really just you or maybe one other person, right? And then the onus falls on your doubles partner if you're shit in the bed. Because they're like, oh, okay, we didn't do that in practice. Here we are. And the position you're in there is you're going, cool, I'm the mental skills consultant right now because holy cow, what was that?
Right.
What's there is that they think, and I don't want to speak for your partner, but this is what I assume, is that they think they're setting a positive goal. When we talk, I was doing a lot of goal setting with my athletes, and every single one of them framed it negatively. I won't lose. I won't have a bad attitude. Guess what your brain hears? Bad attitude, bad attitude, bad attitude, double fault, double
Lose,
fault, double
lose.
fault.
Yes.
You know, brains don't work in negative feedback loops. They like positive. So they're going to reframe it for you, but all they're going to hear, or at least rather your brain will be a little lazy and there's like, oh, just throw out the don't. And they'll just hear the, the focus
Lose.
is
Yeah.
the losing. And so I think, there's two layers there where either you have to do work later with your partner or you in that moment say, hey, where are your feet right now? And are your feet in a winning position? Let's keep going.
Nice. Yeah.
Just in those quick moments is how oh, I know we have the next game. I know we have the next set. And you just have to momentum it a little bit. And I also think, especially in tennis, because it's so segmented, is it works in your favor to segment out your goals. I am going to do this. I feel this way. And I think the more specific you can get, I feel great about getting my serve next time. And just really catering it and making it very personalized is going to be your best move. But in that moment, you say, really? I know where my feet are and we're winning right now. So I know we're going to keep doing that. So bringing your body back into it and bringing your mind to connect it to that, I think is going to be your best case scenario.
Oh, so good.
Also, she needs to go see someone about that.
This is like literally 20 years ago and it is stuff. Do you have any selfish questions like that or fun questions to ask her?
Well, I think that it's been interesting, right? And I can say this from a standpoint. I grew up in New England. I'm a fifth or sixth generation Vermonter. I go back a long way. And in that, one of my primary relationships with my dad, who I had many struggles with, loved him dearly, but sports became our vehicle.
Yeah.
And that was the place we get a chance. It was the Red Sox, it was the Patriots, it was the Celtics, it was the Bruins. And those Boston teams were our place that we get a chance to build our bridges where other bridges didn't work so well. Those were our bridges. I got a chance to call them about games, talk about different things. Honey, I feel like what sports really has offered you and I, if I may say something personal, we have, my goodness, I think I like to say that we have an incredible relationship. Oh, I love you dearly, and you and I are so connected. And then we have just a little wonderful butter on the toast, which is our fact that you decided to adopt my teams, and
Got grandfathered in.
you got grandfathered in, whether you liked it or not. And is that an interesting part, I think, about how family dynamics can play into all the different ways in which we cheer for things, we hold to traditions about things. Sports offers such a unique way to uphold tradition and give us another vehicle for connecting on things that bring this collective effervescence and this joy that is as much part of our family, but also a part of a whole different experience, which is, this fandom, whether your team is somebody, that's a soccer team in England or football team in the United States. How do you feel that affects the dynamics in family? Because it's a fascinating idea.
Well, my answer, the one that comes to mind is that, and I so agree with you, Dad. Having sports with you has been one of the best portions of my life. And I think sports offer like this really cool avenue for family members to connect when other things start to fall. But I want to say, how cool would it be is if I think about like Papa still being here or anything like that, like if he had seen some of his favorite athletes seek mental health services and normalize that. Because this idea that therapy has been normalized is wrong. People say, oh, people are talking about it. I'm like, no, people talk about it in the same way that they go, oh, it's really cool for them, not for me. It's a lot of, I'm so happy they're getting therapy. Okay, what about you? And I think a lot about like if we could start to see athletes talk really like AJ Brown's a great example of this. He talks very openly about it and he's really praised. And so it would be really incredible if other athletes could take suit, specifically male athletes, because it's often that they are, don't talk so much about mental health. And I think if we could see that start to, grow in conversation, a lot of families would benefit. Because like you said, like the NBA, NFL, WNBA, like we are the most watched things in American culture. And if we can add this element of, hey, they're also taking care of themselves, the ripple effect, the butterfly effect that might have on the community as a whole, I think would be really wonderful.
Love that. That is such a powerful idea, right? Because permission giving, We look at how we revere our athletes for what they do on the field. And I do believe at a deep, deep level, when we know more about their stories, AJ Brown and the work he does, reading that book before each and every game, the ways in which they would give permission for a lot of people who are on the sideline, just admiring their athletic prowess on the field, to really see the deeper implications of what makes them who they are, and then open them up to who they could be with that level of inquiry and that level of willingness to go deep. That's a beautiful thought, and I really want to hold that, sweetheart, because I really feel like the work that you're doing in the world is going to help people to see how that can come to life. For fans, for people who say themselves as not athletes, but just people who enjoy watching sports, I really believe that collective consciousness gets a chance to really admire and then give themselves the opportunity to inspire themselves to emulate the deeper implications of performance
Um,
beyond just how well you catch a ball or how fast you can run.
Yeah. And I think I love the way you both talk about athletes. Like my entire life, mom, whether that was like with tennis and baseball or dad with football and lacrosse, I think you both always made a point to make sure we were talking about the athlete as a whole versus just what they did. And I think it's really made that such a pressure point in the way I look at athletes, is making sure that they're optimizing their performance off the field as much as they are on.
Yeah, that is such an amazing statement.
So
Well, I think that's a great thing to wrap up on, unless there's
absolutely.
anything, and then I want to end actually with some fun rapid fire.
Yeah.
But anything else about mental performance, personal healing that you would add, or do you want to get right to the rapid fire?
No, I just want to say, like, when we talk about this and we talk about uplifting individuals, I just want to really make sure it's so clear that I'm so grateful for a lot of women who have come before me in this field, specifically women of color who have really paved a path for people like me to come forward and feel strong in my passion for sport, passion for mental health, and passion for getting my voice out there, because it can kind of be a scary world right now. To be maybe a smaller person in that realm. So I just think it's really important that we continue to uplift all voices in this space, because it's important that every single one be heard.
absolutely,
Amazing,
sweetheart.
amazing.
Thank you for
Bravo
that.
to that.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Are you ready for it?
As I'll ever be.
Okay. Favorite sport?
Football.
What's your pump up song, like for your runs or anything? Work, getting ready.
Oh, Nissan Altima by Dochi. Holy cow.
Oh, I don't think I know that.
I don't know that. We gotta put that as the out song for today's podcast.
Oh, this is a good one. Either favorite book or book that changed your thinking.
Oh gosh.
Is an avid reader, by the way.
I know it's so hard to not want to, like, what book I really love, The House on the Cerulean Sea.
Oh, that is a good one.
It's a good one. And it's about queer voices in a really dark space and where they find a lot of joy and light and celebrating queer joy.
Wow.
What is one thing that you have as a private practice that you're willing to tell the world about that is one of the greatest ways that you've helped to bring your light to a full octave in your life?
Oh, this is so silly, but you have to really think you're the main character. And I want to just take that a step further. That doesn't mean being an egomaniac or that you're the only one that matters. But at the end of the day, you're running your story. And I want you to make sure you want to read the book at the end.
Well, on that note, I can't speak for you, but you have been an avid journaler since you were before you reached double digits. And I would imagine that is part of it.
Yes. Reflecting on thoughts and what's so great is I implore people, if you think you're about to say something or do something crazy, try writing it down first.
Yeah.
Right?
So good.
Writing it down first. You might be like, yeah, you know what? Absolutely. Or you might go, that is great that I wrote that down. It's great that it exists.
We talked about that in our podcast last week. We called it the sacred pause, but we didn't talk about writing it down, which is awesome.
Even more. That's even a greater pause.
Yeah.
Right? Oh my gosh.
How about, do you have a go-to recovery ritual? I know you're in training for a half marathon right now. Do you have that go-to ritual for yourself?
Right now, honestly, I'm a very large routine person. So I don't know if it's necessarily having a cool down, but I have a run up that if I've done that, I'm set up for success regardless. So that means I have, watched Andy Cohen in the morning. I have kissed all the cats. I have done my Peloton workout. And I have said 3 things I love about my fiance. And so I think if I like nail those 4 things, I can look back at the rest of the day and go, yeah, today was a success.
So that's a pre-covery. You have a
That's a pre-recovery. My recovery is like maybe I get out the roller and I remember
Good.
Good girl.
I'll be hey, you know what? I have room for improvement. If I didn't have room for
Don't we all?
improvement, what a boring life that might be.
Dakota, it has been an absolute joy and pleasure to not just have you on the podcast, but to witness this blooming and this personal development. And as always, you light up our lives. You're so much fun to be around. Can't wait to see you and not too long. Thank you for taking time to join us on our silly podcast that we are really enjoying doing. And I think people are going to get so much out of this. Is there any intention you want to put out into the world for, your highest and best future, even though I know you have a year left in your dual master's program? What do you vision for yourself and that we can hold for you?
Oh gosh. I just think that like as long as we want to do good and do good, we will feel good. And I think as long as I am participating in the greater good, then I'm going to be totally happy. And my greater good right now looks like working with athletes. And so
Awesome.
as long as I am only positively contributing, then I will consider it a major success.
Beautiful.
That is so beautiful. Sweetheart, I just want to say everything that Mom said, I echo. And you need to know what an honor and a privilege and such a deep joy it has been to be your dad and continue to watch you grow and flourish in the world. Sweetheart, I'm just so deeply proud of you. And thank you for making time to bring your light and your love into Love and Life Elevated. You're awesome. I miss you.
Thank
I
you.
love you so much.
It's an honor and it's a privilege.
Yes. Thanks everyone for being part of it today. Bye.
Peace.